Yeah, it's being recorded. You can start.
Okay. So, hello and good evening, everyone. Let me thank Rahul at the outset for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. It's really very heartening for me to introduce philosophy and its main branches to students of economics. I always used to feel when I used to teach in Fergusson College that there were not many students from economics special who would also opt for philosophy. I always found that sort of gap in my class because I always wanted my classes to have inputs from various disciplines. And somehow the economics students were not probably interested in philosophy to the level I would have loved them to be. And so it's a very welcome situation for me that somebody from Gokula Institute has initiated this summer school in philosophy. So thank you very much for all of you, to all of you for being here. Let me at the outset tell you that I would like this, whatever time that we are spending together today, I would like it to be interactive. So although we are going to reserve about 30 minutes for discussion after my presentation, please don't mind stopping me in between if you feel like. Okay, please don't hesitate. This is how I always have conducted my classes. So if you feel that you have some doubt or difficulty and you want to stop and ask me there and then, or even if you want to say that, no, ma'am, I disagree with you on this, please feel free to do that. And you can ask me questions in any of the three languages that I know of, English, Hindi, Marathi. So let language not be a barrier. One more request, if it's possible for you, if I can also see your faces. And if you turn on your videos, if possible, if that is that is creating problem of bandwidth, then I would not advise you to do that. Because, this online teaching business, all of us are sufferers, both the learners and the teachers. And it feels very strange when you just look at yourself and your face on the screen and keep on speaking, but whatever you are comfortable with. So what we are going to talk about today is, as you have been told already, I'm going to introduce to you the main branches of philosophy, assuming that you have a fairly good idea about what philosophy is all about and what is the peculiarity of philosophy as an academic subject, which is not a social science. It's definitely not a natural science, I don't have to say that. But it's not a social science. It's not also a formal science like mathematics or logic. So we generally classify it under humanities, where you would also find literature and linguistics and language studies and history many a times. Now, a few historians would say that no, history is a social science, but let me keep that debate aside. So what I'm assuming is that you know the nature of philosophy as a discipline in humanities, which means that it's basically studies what is it to be a human being, what is a human society, culture, and what are the relations that all of us have with each other, with the world, and what do we do with our lives. Philosophers have always tried to make sense of the world in which they find themselves. I'm sure that the earlier presenters must have told you a few definitions of philosophy. Have they, Rahul? Yes, so something like philo of Sophia, love of wisdom, and then philosophy as a child of wonder, then philosophy as mother of all sciences, and philosophy as a synoptic view of the world, etc., etc., etc. So what first and foremost, this is just a quick revision, and if you feel that you're getting bored with this, just tell me. I'll immediately move ahead. But this is just to let you know that first and foremost, we must think of what philosophy is not, because we use the word philosophy even in our day-to-day discussions and conversations, but with a different understanding. What we are discussing here is philosophy as an academic discipline. So keep that in mind. Okay. So philosophy is not to be confused with religion or religious discourses and sermons of any kind. Philosophy is not to be confused with spirituality and spiritual discourses that people give. Philosophy is not to be confused with personal world views. For example, when we tell each other, "Arey, तुम्हारी philosophy अलग है, मेरी अलग है भाई, तो तुम मुझे मत बताओ क्या करना है, क्या नहीं करना है." Not that. No, we are not although all of this would be a part of philosophy, very broadly speaking, this is not what we are talking. We are talking of a very ancient discipline which developed in almost all cultures. And that is why in philosophy, usually in Indian academics, what is generally taught is Western philosophy and Indian philosophy both. Now, this itself should come as a surprise because, although I don't know, but whether your syllabus includes, for example, Kautilya's Arthashastra as the Indian part of economic thought in the ancient times, etc., etc. But I don't think so because economics has moved away quite a bit from teaching history of economics, which I actually repent, sort of. I feel that it should be a part of your study. And then these differences that you have. But with philosophy especially, it is not possible to talk of the philosophy with capital T and capital B because there are philosophies. There is not just one philosophy, there are philosophies which have developed in Europe, which has developed in India and other ancient countries like China, for example, has its own ancient philosophy. Korea has philosophy, Japan has its own philosophy, Islamic world has its own philosophy. So there is Arabic philosophy, there is African philosophy. So unlike natural sciences or unlike mathematics or logic, philosophy has this deep relation with the culture in which it actually evolves. That is why you have these different kinds of philosophies. Still, we are calling them philosophy, right? So there must be something common also, although there would be some differences emerging from the cultural specificities and peculiarities. There are commonalities. Of course, there are. For example, let us take this celebrated definition or description. It's not a definition really. It's a description of philosophy when you say that it's a mother of all sciences. So what is actually meant by it? Economics students, I'm sure, would be completely baffled if I tell them that, economics is also a child of philosophy after all. And you would say, oh, shut up. Don't give me that crap. Yeah. So try to understand what is meant when it is claimed, of course, by philosophers themselves, that philosophy is the mother of all sciences. And but the world also acknowledges it. That is why even if you have a doctorate in economics, it would still be called philosophy, doctor in philosophy, PhD. I hope all of you know the long form. It's doctor of philosophy. So the world has recognized the role of philosophy being the mother of all sciences. Why am I saying this? Imagine a world about 3,000 years ago when man had not progressed, had not evolved in terms of knowledge to the extent to which we in 21st century have evolved, where man is curious about everything like a child, everything around it, around himself or herself and the society and the natural world. And as I said, trying to understand this world, trying to know this world, trying to make sense of this world, so that later on he decides how he or she is to conduct himself in this world. You first have to know what the world is like. What are you? And what are you supposed to do here? What would be good for you? What would be bad for you? All right. So you are curious, you want to know. But now there are different ways of knowing. Like philosophy, you will find that all cultures also have their own mythologies. You all have heard of mythological stories, I'm sure. In India, we have these Puranas, which are full of those fanciful stories. And we also have ancient mythological stories, even in the Vedic literature. Puranas come much later. What do these mythological stories do? They try to explain the world around us. Right? They try to explain the world. For example, the fact that Earth, though it is shaped like a ball, it's round, it still is not very shaky, it's very stable. So one of the stories would say that because this Earth has been held on a huge hood of a snake, Vasuki, Naga, so as long as the hood of the snake is held in a very stable manner, the Earth is stable. But if the snake feels a little uncomfortable and moves a bit, then there would probably be earthquake. Yeah. So what are you trying to do? You're using imagination in order to explain the nature of the world around you. The Earth generally is very stable, doesn't make you fall. when you stand up or when you walk, but at times there are earthquakes and everything falls down. So why? This question why, question what is there, and then the question why is it the way in which it is? Why do things take place in a certain manner? These are the questions that have triggered our imagination, that have triggered our intelligence to a very great extent. And what is very peculiar about this human inquiry is that, unlike animals, our curiosity, our wonder goes much beyond, satisfying the need of survival. We are going much beyond what is really required for us to survive in this cruel world. The world is, I think, it was cruel in the ancient times when you had to fight against the beasts, probably, and it is still cruel, even in the society, the kind of society that we have built. Unfortunately, it's still cruel for many of us. So, but whatever we want to know is not just for the sake of somehow surviving in this struggle for life. We are curious simply because we want to know what is a particular thing and why is it the way it is. This is the pure sense of wonder. Now, this wonder in mythology particularly is answered by using a lot of imagination, very creative use of imagination. I must tell you that you all must read mythologies from different cultures. They're so interesting. And they give us wonderful insights about how the ancients thought about the world, right? Then you also have religion, which also tries to tell you, for example, from where did the world come about? Is there a creator of the world? And you know that barring very few examples like Buddhism and Jainism, most of the religions of the world would say, yes, there is a creator of the world. Somebody has created the world. And then what is the purpose of the existence of this world? What is the purpose of the existence of human beings? So on and so forth. So religion is also trying to answer a set of questions. Apart from having rituals and practices belonging to a particular religion, it is also, I would say, an answer to a quest of finding a meaning and purpose in life. But then religion bases itself on faith. You have to have faith either in a prophet, or you have to have a faith in a text which is called a scripture, yeah, or you have to have faith in people who call themselves godmen, etc., etc. And the level of deterioration that it has reached nowadays. Yeah, now as if some of these godmen have become items in the supermarket on sale. They're on sale, and there's a supermarket of. I'm not using this. This is not the term that I have been coining, so to say. I have heard the Honorable Dalai Lama saying that many years, a few decades ago, when I attended one of his lectures in Pune itself, when he said that nowadays there is a supermarket of religion and spirituality, and that's so true. Yeah, but religion also, I believe, originated in that sense of wonder, in that attempt to make sense of our lives, our place in the world. And then there was philosophy. Now, what differentiated philosophy from religion and mythology was that philosophy tried to give the answers to its own questions on the basis of intellect, what philosophers call reason, rationality, right? Not using imagination in an unruly manner. Of course, there's a use of imagination. It's there in science also. Nobody can deny that, right? But this imagination is then governed by logic, governed by reason. And philosophers were the first, let's say, inquirers to use reason alone in the quest of knowledge. They did not use imagination, nor did they ask the interlocutors, those with whom they were in conversation. They did not ask them to have faith in them. They did not say, accept this because I say so. Like if I tell you that, this is what philosophy is. And if you ask why, I tell you that it's because Deepti ma'am says that, and Deepti ma'am has been a teacher of philosophy for so many years, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the right way. Philosophers will give you reasons for whatever they claim. They will try to provide arguments and reasons for that. And you are supposed to evaluate those reasons with your own intellect, rationality, and accept them or reject them. That freedom of rejecting a particular view is always given in philosophy. Please remember this. Now, it is this that brings philosophy very close to science. Don't you see that? Even in science, there is no free play of imagination. There is no scope for faith, a blind faith, so to say, but there's a rational inquiry into the nature of things, right? Now, what distinguishes philosophy from science is that science uses empirical methods. Economics is one of the very revered social science because the extent to which empirical methodology can be used in economics is far greater than other social sciences, which are slowly following the footsteps of economics. But we are all dealing with human beings, so it's difficult to have that quantificationality every time, so it becomes difficult to use empirical methods many a times. So philosophy from ancient times almost till date does not use empirical methods. It uses other methods, such as rational speculation, using logic and trying to figure out what must have been the origin of the world. How did the world come into being? What made the original stuff change? How did it change? Why did it change? Etc. Remember, in ancient times, it was not possible. Technology was not developed at all, so it was not possible to make experiments of any kind. And only your observation, your experience in the world, and your reason which tries to make sense of it, these were the only tools the philosophers had, but they used them to their maximum capacity and came up with different answers and different theories. But because philosophy did not use empirical methods and science started using empirical methods, slowly it so happened that many questions that were raised in philosophy originally got final and not final, actually, I should not use the word final. There is nothing final even in science. But let's say objective, universally accepted, unanimously accepted answers were found on the basis of empirical methods, observation and experimentation, that those were used by sciences. And what happened was, slowly the area that philosophy occupied was given away to sciences. So just to tell you a fact of interest, you might know this, but if you don't, this would be definitely interesting. Who was Newton? A physicist, right? A scientist, right? Do you know what is the name of Newton's text in which he writes about physics and the famous 3 laws of motion and all? It's a text that there's a very long name, even I don't remember it perfectly. But my point is, it was called a text in natural philosophy. Now remember, Newton belongs to modern times. He doesn't belong to ancient or medieval times. So all these inquiries and all these studies were clubbed under philosophy until very recently, that means few centuries ago. And then slowly, each science established its independent domain, as it were, and then probably philosophy was left with very little. That's what at one point of time philosophers felt. Like always, I used to tell my students that, the mother was abandoned by all the children, one after another. And now probably she's living alone in her house. But that's not true. Who was the last child to have left philosophy? Again, a few decades ago, it was psychology. In my own college, Fergusson, which is more than 100 years old, as all of you probably know, psychology, a paper in psychology used to be taught under philosophy. And very rightly so, because psychology had not then established itself as an independent science, social science, right? So, its philosophy's job has been to raise very pertinent questions, very important, very relevant questions, using rationality, and then also giving proper directions to find out the answers. And when the sciences started moving in those directions, and of course substantiated their answers with empirical evidence, they got the answers and they slowly moved away from philosophy. But today is the time of interdisciplinarity. Today is the time when we have realized that if we want to understand human being, if we want to understand the human world and the entire world, where we talk of ecology today, so natural world is not something which is different from us. We are not external. We have not literally fallen from the sky, as it were. Yeah, we very much belong to this natural world, and there's a whole system to which all of us belong. So, in order to know ourselves thoroughly, we must know every other thing in a way, and our connections. So, we can't be, totally complacent with specialization in one discipline where it's not connected with other disciplines. We have to take a very holistic view and join dots. It's as it were, if you are solving a jigsaw puzzle, you pick up the pieces and place them in a proper way so that you have a whole picture, the bigger picture, not just looking at human behavior, for example, only from the point of view of game theory, rational choice theory, or from the point of Freudian psychology based on the ego, superego, or from spiritual perspective, soul and rebirth and whatnot. No, we probably need to put all of this together and then see what is it that comes about. No, philosophy has always taken this synoptic approach, this holistic approach. That's why the scope of philosophy has been very, very wide. Now I'm coming to very quickly to the discussion of branches, particular branches. But before that, I had to define this area. It's a very wide area. Like I always say, nothing under the sky and on the earth is outside philosophy. Everything can be philosophized about. You can have a philosophy of anything. Just put anything after that. Yeah. So it's a very, very vast scope that this subject has. Probably to systematize it in order to make it understandable, let's say that philosophy basically deals with 4 questions or 4 relations. It deals with the relation that humans have with nature, all right? Humans have with other human beings or society at large, fine. It also deals with the relation humans have with themselves. We all also have relation with ourselves. I don't know whether you realize it, but maybe after the presentation, just think for a moment about it. You're related to yourself. And then for those who believe in some kind of transcendental reality, supernatural reality, like God or some energy, some force, there would be a relation between man and the supernatural also. All right. So philosophy studies all these 4 relations in all its aspects. Right? It's interested in all this. But what are the kinds of questions that philosophy raises? The best way to understand the nature of a subject is, rather than beginning with a very neatly given definition, if you are introduced to what kind of things this subject talks about, what kind of questions that it raises, and what types of answers has it come about, then it becomes more interesting. Otherwise, it's like a textbook, philosophy is la 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 blah blah. No, that doesn't appeal to our brain, nor does it appeal to our heart. So let's say, what kinds of questions is philosophy really interested in? Sometimes you get to hear that, questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? People with long faces ask these questions, and these are supposed to be profoundly philosophical questions. Yes and no. Because these are the questions that philosophy would raise, but these are a part of the wider questions that philosophers have always been interested in. And I would, for the sake of brevity again and convenience, say that basically there are 3 questions, very pertinent, very fundamental questions, which philosophy has always been interested in at all times and at all places. So the various kinds of philosophies I talked about, you will find that in all the traditions, Indian, African, Western, American, this, that, everywhere these 3 questions are raised and there have been answers. And from these 3 questions, 3 traditional eminent branches of philosophy emerge. What are these 3 questions? The first question is, what is? Or what exists? What is it that exists? What is existence? Okay, that's the first question. What is? What is the world around me? What is it like? How many things are there? What kinds of things are there? So the first kind of question, let us say, is the question about being or existence. Being, I'm saying being because we know the verb to be. Yeah, to be. the famous quote from Hamlet. I wonder whether you heard it, to be or not to be, that is the question. Now, that was a very practical existential question that Hamlet had at that point of time. But philosophers raise it into a wider question and ask, what is it to be? What is it to exist? What is? है क्या यहाँ पे इस दुनिया में? ये दुनिया क्या है? इसमें क्या है? काय आहे? मुळात आहेच काय? ज्याच्याबद्दल आपल्याला विचार करायचा आहे. Yeah? And then the immediate next question which emerges from this is, but how do we know what is? How can we say that something exists and something does not exist? How can I say that something is real or something is unreal? Okay. So the next question is, how do I know that which exists or that which does not exist? At least for that which does not exist, we at least say that it does not exist. If it does not exist, then there's no question of knowing it, isn't it? Do you get it? Yeah. So the question of existence also leads to question of knowing. So the first is the question of being. The second is the question of regarding knowing, and the third question, very important for all of us, whether you're philosophers, philosophy students or not, doesn't matter. This is the question of, what do I do? How should I conduct myself? What should I do? On the basis of the knowledge that I have of what exists, who am I, what am I have to decide what kind of life is good for me. How am I supposed to live my life? How am I supposed to conduct myself in my family, in my institution, in my society, etc., etc. So there is a question about being, there's a question about knowing, and then there's a question about doing. Yeah, three very important areas of human life: being, knowing, and doing. You can almost reduce everything else in these three questions, isn't it? So these are the three traditional questions, very central questions of philosophical inquiry, and the three branches that emerge from this are these. The question of being is dealt with in the branch called metaphysics. So metaphysics as a branch of philosophy basically deals with questions regarding reality. I'll first give you the names of all the three, and then we will talk about them in some details. The second branch is about the related, related to the question of knowing, is called epistemology. Epistemology. I think all of you know the meaning of the term logy. Now you have so many logies in college: sociology, psychology, biology, isn't it? Have you ever wondered what is this term logy? What does it mean? No. See, that sense of wonder has to be alive in you. Always. You're a human being, isn't it? Don't just think of jobs and career and other things. Be curious. Have that sense of wonder. Why are all these disciplines ending with this name logy? Because the word logy means a systematic study. So sociology is a systematic study of society. Biology is a systematic study of life forms. Are you getting it? Geology is the study of geo, earth, not geo of Ambani's. Yeah, it's geo, not GIO, geo. So now you have epistemology, which is, now look at this. This is a systematic study of episteme, a Greek term which means knowledge. A study of knowledge. Wonderful, isn't it? Have you ever thought of what is knowledge? Have you ever thought, how do you know? What is the distinction between knowledge and belief? Knowledge and information? Oh my God. You claim to know so many things, isn't it? Once the HSC results are out, you're in the seventh heaven. Yeah, you know so much now. Now you have crossed that threshold, and now you are in a prestigious institute like Berkeley. So you know so many things. Okay, but tell me, how do you know that you know? Tell me, what is knowledge? When you claim to know, have you ever thought, what is it to know? This is something that epistemology deals with. Okay, the second branch. The third branch is something that all of you have heard of. Now, this is not news to you, and the word is also not new. It's not going to surprise you at all. It's called ethics. Ethics, which deals with moral rightness or wrongness of your action, whether your action is morally acceptable, not acceptable, good, bad, etc., etc. This is called ethics or moral philosophy, a branch which deals with the questions related to doing. What is right, what is good. And please remember, some of you might be like, oh my God, now when she starts about talking about ethics, she'll again bombard us with do's and don'ts and rules and regulations and what the youngsters must do and must not do. Hello, sorry, no, not at all. Because, for people of your age, I would say that philosophy is the most appropriate discipline, in the sense that you would enjoy it the most. You know why? Because in this particular age of yours, you are biologically, psychologically, in that particular mode of existence where you want to challenge and question everything, where you are in a rebellious mood. Whatever your parents, your elders, your teachers tell you, you would say, no, but you have to tell me why. Why am I supposed to do this? Why is it like that? Why should I listen to you? And I'm so happy that you do it. I always used to say that if some of you are very obedient and you never question what you are being told, then I'm really worried about you. There's something wrong in your development. This is your journey of development. Philosophy is a subject which allows you to question each and everything that your teacher says, that a particular textbook says, a particular theory says, no matter how prestigious that person or the text or that institute to which that person belongs is. Doesn't matter. As rational beings, all of us have this fundamental right to question. All right? And philosophy fully acknowledges that. So even in ethics, we are not, as philosophy students or teachers, we never come up with ethical sermons, do's and don'ts. Yeah. In fact, we ask the questions, why are these the do's that we have? Tell us, always speak the truth and don't steal and always be loving and caring. And we would ask why. What's so great about it? What is the criteria, the basis of which you are saying that all these things are good? And why do you call certain things bad? Tell me, what are your criteria? And once you tell me your criteria, I would question you on the criteria also, and the principles and the theories that are involved. Okay? So there is nothing which is given in an authoritative manner. The crux of philosophy is critical reasoning. Critical reasoning, open-mindedness, questioning, but with humbleness. You have to realize that the other person also is a rational being. He or she also knows. So you have to have an open dialogue. Don't be dogmatic about your own beliefs. Yeah. And at the same time, don't accept anything on the basis of authority. That's very important. And this is exactly what you call today the scientific spirit of mind. Scientific mentality, isn't it? What is the peculiarity of science? That it doesn't say that, okay, this one is now the last word and no one can go beyond this. No. Maybe 10 years, 20 years from now, a particular established theory would be challenged and the truly scientific-minded people would accept that and not say that, no, how can that established theory of, say, Newton or Einstein can be refuted? Haven't you seen many such up and downs in economics also? People come into different theories. You have Adam Smith first, then you have Keynesian economy, and it just goes on. You had Marxism once upon a time, socialism all over, and now you have capitalism coming back in a new form. Yeah, liberalism and libertarianism and communitarianism. It just goes on because we are moving ahead. Times are changing, life is changing, questions are changing. So our approach must also be very dynamic towards all of this. But the basics remain same. These three basic questions would always be there. What is, how do I know it, and what must I do? Okay, I have some 15 minutes left with me now, I suppose, 15 to 20, Rahul?
Yes, ma'am. But you can go on as long as you want, like another 5-10 minutes extra if you need. That's all right.
Okay, thank you so much. Let us begin with metaphysics because historically also, especially if you look at Western philosophy, it begins with Greek philosophy, as probably all of you know. And I hope you have heard the name of Socrates or the famous trio, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Plato was the student of Socrates and Aristotle was the student of Plato. So you have these three great names, one after the other. And you know what I really respect a lot about this tradition is that the disciple has always tried to go beyond what the master has said. He has never said that what the master has said is the last word, the final ultimate truth. And the master has always given the right to the disciple to question, to challenge, to criticize, and to abandon, if necessary, the master's views. All right. So it all begins, we say, with Socrates, but actually it begins before Socrates. So we call that period the period of pre-Socratic philosophy, where the inquiries were basically metaphysical in nature. Why? Because what really intrigued these people is, see, there is immense variety in the world. The number of objects that there exist in the world is infinite, for sure. And there is an immense variety too. But now from where does this variety and diversity come in? For example, there are human beings, there are so many of them. We know the population explosion that we have had in the last few decades, there are billions and billions of people, but they're all called human beings, right? We classify them as human beings. Why? They have something in common. They all have the same source, right? We classify generally all the things that exist in the world into living and non-living. And then we would further classify them to taxonomical systems that you have in biology and many other disciplines. So what you know is, although there are many things, many things are of the same type. So probably they have emerged from one common thing. For example, all wooden things, why are they called wooden things? Because they're made up of wood, and wood comes from trees, right? This is a very basic thing to know. Now, the philosophers raised this question at the level of the entire universe and asked, how does this variety come in? From which basic elements? Which fundamental elements? And how many such elements were there? What was their nature? So first of all, a very crucial distinction for metaphysics, and I think all of us at the commonsensical level also make this distinction, which I'll be again taking up when I'll discuss epistemology, is the distinction between appearance and reality. I hope all of you understand this. Many a times things appear to be of some kind or appear to be there, but actually they're not there. Take an example of what is happening right now. We are meeting online, right? Okay. I have not switched off my video, and even if you would hear my voice. All of you have switched off your videos except Rahul. Now, because I see these slaps on my screen, I assume that you are there. Some of you, yeah, the names that appear. Do I really know whether you're there or not? Whether you have logged in and you have moved out somewhere, or whether you are dozing off, whether you are lost in your dreams, I don't know. You appear to be there, but I don't know what is the reality. You get my point? No, you would say this is because virtual. What about when we are face to face? Even then, there are problems. There are illusions. There are hallucinations. There are dreams. I dream of something, and that dream seems to be so real to me as long as I'm dreaming. In dream, I never realize that this is a dream. It's only after I wake up that I realize, oh my God, it was a dream after all, right? And even in waking life, we are many a times deluded. We are deceived by appearances, isn't it? The famous example, of course, is that of a mirage in the desert when there appears to be water at some distance, but there's no water. And there are many such examples of illusions. So first and foremost, we must know what is it to be real? What is reality? When do you say something is real and when do you say something is unreal? For example, those of you who would say that ghosts do not exist, and some of you would say, of course, they exist. You will first have to come to a sort of agreement about what is it that you mean by real. Is real for you mean real is something which exists in a tangible form, which you can hold, like this water bottle, which you can touch, you can see, you can feel, you can drink the water. And then somebody says, no, but ghosts are spirits, they're not material, so you can't hold them, they're not tangible. Then you would say, oh my God, your notion of reality is different from my notion of reality. Do spirits exist? Does God exist? Are you getting it? First of all, we'll have to find out what is it that we really call real. What is real and what is only apparent? Okay, so the diversity is apparent, but probably underlying the diversity is the true reality, which is of few elements. It has all emerged from those few elements. A very complicated process. You all have learned periodic table as students of science in school. Yeah. So even science today speaks of basic elements, but the idea basically comes from philosophy. The pre-Socratic philosophers or the ancient Indian philosophers who spoke about the Panchamahabhutas. You have heard of the notion Panchamahabhutas, Prithvi, Aapa, Tej, Vayu, Akash. And they say everything comes from these 5 great elements, basic elements, right? So some philosophers said that there is just one element from which everything comes. Others said that no, there are 2. Some said there are many. So you have a variety of answers. There are 2 very important questions that, yes, Rahul.
Ma'am, before you continue, Anushka wanted to ask you something.
Yes, sure.
Anushka,
Hello, ma'am. Yes.
Hello.
My question was that, so as you said, you can always go ahead and question people's criteria. So even if people, in the beginning of time had said that, everything comes from 5 elements, and now we've got the periodic table, and then first we thought that atoms were the smallest units, but then we discovered, neutrons and protons, and then even now inside that you've got quarks and all of those things coming up. So that way you can always question people's criteria and question people's observations that, what you think is real is not what my assumption of reality is. So then how has metaphysics not sort of broken down into this equilibrium of everyone just saying that we can never know anything for sure? I mean, it puzzles me how something like that can be debated for so long when there's obviously this underlying, answer to.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. What is your name?
Anushka.
Anshi, yeah. You're absolutely right. The position that you referred to, it's actually a position in philosophy. Said that there are so many positions about what is the nature of ultimate reality, etc., etc. And there are so many answers. So, a common man gets baffled. Whom am I supposed to believe? Today, we say that no, science gives you the answers, which have to be accepted at least today. Whatever answers science give you today, you have to accept. But there would be people who would say that, but these answers might change tomorrow, so why should I believe? These people are called skeptics. Skeptics or skepticism is that trend of philosophy which always raises doubt about the possibility of knowledge. Knowledge would be always true and non-erroneous and objective and perfect and universal. But I was going to refer to it when I would come to epistemology. But your question actually is reinforcing my own idea that I was going to introduce to you is when you ask a metaphysical question, you are inadvertently pushed into epistemological questions. And your epistemological queries push you into metaphysical queries. So maybe I'll talk a little more about that when I come to epistemology. For the time being, let me continue a little bit with few more details about metaphysics. So metaphysics is interested in knowing the ultimate reality. Ultimate as in that from which everything else emerges, and that itself doesn't emerge from anything else. In that sense, it is ultimate. It's like the Big Bang theory that you talk about. So before Big Bang, what was there? It was all concentrated in one point. So if you call that ultimate reality for the time being, and I know that even Big Bang is not accepted by all physicists, fine, but let us just assume as an example. So metaphysicians at that time were interested in that ultimate reality. With that ultimate reality, there is 2 important questions which gave rise to many theories within metaphysics. The first question was about the number of ultimate reality. Like I said, is that only one? For example, probably you have heard of the concept of Brahman from Indian philosophy. Shankaracharya's Advaita Vedanta, which is one of the very popular philosophies in India, which says that everything is just Brahman. There's only one reality, which is called Brahman. And the differences, the multiplicity, the change, the variety that you see is all Maya, illusion. So everything is just one. This is called monism, for obvious reason, mono, one, right? So the theories which say that everything emerges from one ultimate reality are called monist theories. And you have monism in both Indian and Western traditions. Then there are people who would say that no, there are two basic realities. One is matter, the other is consciousness. Yeah, because like I said, we divide the existing things generally between living and non-living, right? And life, which exhibits consciousness, or which is a reflection, or which is an expression of consciousness, there are again two positions. Can consciousness arise from matter, or does it exist independently? Okay, so some people would say matter and consciousness, or mind as they called it then, soul, mind, Chaitanya, whatever you call it. These two, Jada and Chaitanya, matter and mind, exist separately, and from their permutation and combination, everything else emerges. And then there are people who are pluralists. So those who accept two principles are called dualists, duo, and those who say that there are many, like four basic elements or five basic elements, would be pluralist. And the periodic table today represents the pluralist notion of the universe. But basically, there's one more way of characterizing this. Scientific approach of the world today can be called, in philosophical terminology, a materialistic approach. Why? Because the second question about reality is, what is the nature of ultimate reality? Is it material in nature, or is it spiritual in nature, idealistic in nature? By spiritual, I mean, is the ultimate reality of the nature of consciousness, which exists independently of matter? For example, Brahman is supposed to be Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It's real, Sat, it's Chit, it's conscious, and it's of the nature of pure joy, bliss, Ananda. Okay, so has everything come out of consciousness? Is matter itself an expression of consciousness, or has consciousness arisen from matter? Those who say that matter is the ultimate reality and consciousness is nothing but something which arises as an emergent property of matter through a long process of change that matter undergoes. Because of these forces that exist in the world, a lot of things happen because of the motion that is there in the universe. So there are two now, or again, there are three positions with respect to the question, what is the nature of ultimate reality? One is called materialism. So people who say there is no ancient theory of materialism advocated by pre-Socratic philosophers Democritus and Leucippus, which was also atomism, by the way. They said that there are n number of atoms moving in a vacuum, and they're always perpetually in motion, and these atoms come together and form the world. And when the atoms go away from each other, there's disintegration. No, there's destruction. So that is materialism. Marx is a materialist philosopher who says everything comes from matter. In Indian side, there is Charvaka school, which says that consciousness emerges from matter. There is no soul. All right. And then there is the theory of idealism or spiritualism, which says that there was consciousness first, and then matter emerged from that. So very broadly speaking, people who say that God created the world would be idealist or spiritualist in this sense, because God is pure consciousness and he created the world, which is material world. All right. Or Shankaracharya is an idealist because he believes that there is Brahman, which is conscious, which is consciousness, not conscious, which is consciousness. And then there are realists who would say that both material and spiritual substances exist in their own rights, independently of each other. Okay, so these are important metaphysical questions. And apart from that, philosophers always also talk about what is change? Why does change occur? How does change occur? What is cause-effect relationship? What is causation? Which is so important for material sciences, right? Even social sciences, like economics. Then you also have a very pertinent question, which has become so important and relevant today in the wake of the developments in artificial intelligence, cognitive sciences, neurobiology, neuropsychology, the question of free will and determinism. Do human beings have free will, or is everything predetermined? A very important question. This is a metaphysical question. What is the relation between body and mind that human beings are supposed to have? Is mind separate from body, or does it belong to body? If they are two separate things, then how are they related? How do they interact? Etc. etc. No? So this is the domain of metaphysics. Now, in order to answer all these questions, you have to come back to knowledge. Because if I say that no, matter is the ultimate reality and consciousness emerges from matter, immediately a spiritualist is going to ask me, how do you know? On what basis are you saying this? I have to give proofs. I have to give arguments. And for that, first and foremost, I must say what knowledge is. What is knowledge? Because see, even in day-to-day conversations, we many a times say, I think so. I don't know, but I think so. And you realize, sometimes you say, I am of the opinion that it has to be this, not that. So there's a tentativeness that we use. And sometimes you're like, I know. You don't tell me, I know. Which means that you know for sure. You have some proof, you have some evidence for what you're claiming. Always keep this in mind, that in this age of information technology, social media, it's so important to know what is knowledge. Because otherwise, whatever comes to you through WhatsApp University, if you tend to take it as truth, as knowledge, you're doomed, you're gone, you're destroyed. Yeah? You have to exercise your discretion. You have to know when you use Google, you have to know which sites are authentic and which are not authentic. You have to know what is true and what is fake. What is you use something called fact check, isn't it? To check the fake news. Why do we need all of this? Because we are being bombarded with information, intentionally, unintentionally. Now, there is a lot of difference between information and knowledge. See, when you collect data, yeah, sorry, I'm not looking at your chats because it's kind of difficult for me to read and speak at the same time. So maybe we can take them up towards the end, or if you want to speak, then speak up, maybe. That would be better for me. If you want to ask anything, raise your hand, and I think Rahul will conduct that, how to manage that. Yeah, Rahul?
I'll make sure I'll check about the hand raising in the comment.
Yeah, because it's difficult for me to do it simultaneously.
Sure, not an issue.
Yeah. So when you as economics students collect some data, that data, collection of data itself doesn't become your project, does that? Unless you arrange the data, sort it out, connect it, and arrive at some conclusion using some theoretical concepts, it doesn't get converted into knowledge of any kind. So having a lot of information is not having knowledge. Please keep this in mind. I always wonder at those people who, appear in quizzes. And oh my God, how many facts can they remember? I'm wonderstruck. My memory is so bad, so poor. And how do they know all this? Huh? But are they knowledgeable? I don't know. I wouldn't say they're not, because I really don't know. I have no evidence to say that they're not knowledgeable. But I know for sure that a lot of collection of information is not knowledge. Collection of data is not knowledge. Having beliefs of various kinds does not amount to knowledge. Now, we have a very celebrated definition of knowledge in philosophy, which will help you a lot. Knowledge is defined as justified true belief. This is called the Jtb analysis. Jtb analysis. Justified true belief. Because you can't say that you know something but you don't believe in it. Can you? That sounds so odd, isn't it? I know that I'm talking to students of Oakland Institute, but I don't believe it. No, I can say it metaphorically. Oh my God, Oakland Institute people have invited me. I don't believe it. But when I claim to know it, I definitely believe in it, isn't it? Similarly, my belief has to be true. Maybe I'm dreaming that I'm giving a lecture. But in the morning, when I realized that no, it was only a dream, then no, that was not a piece of knowledge. Or my beliefs can be false. See, this is important. Beliefs can be either true or false. Knowledge cannot be false. When you claim to know, that must be true for you. Now, when can it be true for you? Not just for you, but for others also. then you have a justification, evidence, proof of what you're saying, isn't it? So, and now how do you give the proof or justification? Usually, there are different methodologies, as you know. Every discipline uses its own methodology of providing evidence. So in natural sciences, there would be actual experiments being conducted. In social sciences, different kinds of experiments would be conducted, surveys would be conducted, etc., etc. So that is a question of methodologies. But all of us are concerned with truth. And only that is accepted as truth where you can provide justification which is accepted by all concerned, not just by me. Then it becomes subjective, whereas knowledge is supposed to be objective, not subjective. It has to be approved as true by all actual and potential knowers. That's at least the very strict concept of knowledge. Now, when you talk about justification, you are thrown back to another fundamental question in epistemology, namely sources of knowledge. What are the basic sources or means of knowledge? So first and foremost, you have sense organs, 5 sense organs, which I always say are like windows that connect you with the external world. Your mind or your brain is somewhere inside, but the brain needs inputs about the world. From where does it get those inputs? From your 5 sense organs. But like we have seen, everything that appears is not real. All that glitters is not gold. Dista tasa nasta modun jag phasta. So we have to exercise rational power, reason, another very important source of knowledge, reason, intellect. Okay? And this reason or intellect not only helps you organize the data that you have collected through sense organs, to derive conclusions, implications from that, but also it helps you know the formal truths of very exact sciences like mathematics and logic, without which even economics cannot function. In econometry, you are using a lot of maths and stats. You are using logic everywhere. Logic is everywhere. From everyday discourses to the highest knowledge disciplines, logic is used, and logic is another branch of philosophy closely connected with epistemology. Because logic is a study of reasoning. How do we think and reason? How do we construct arguments? When is an argument logically acceptable? So what are correct forms of reasoning and what are incorrect forms of reasoning? What is deductive argument and what is an inductive argument, etc., etc. So logic is another very important branch of philosophy, which helps the epistemological concerns also. So sense perception is one source of knowledge, reason is another source of knowledge, and we also use many a times what is known in English as testimony. Or in Sanskrit or Marathi, we call it Shabda Praman. Right now, you are using testimony as a source of knowledge, because I am speaking from the position of authority. Authority, Shabda, Maza Shabda. Because I've been a philosophy teacher, I know what philosophy is and branches of philosophy are, and you're accepting it because you have not been introduced to these things before. I have been talking about them. So you take me to be authority and take my word for it. And this we have to do in every discipline. Remember, there is a use of testimony in every discipline, even in sciences. Yeah, because you learn science from the textbooks that give you the theories that masters have come up with, isn't it? Your teachers explain these theories to you and you take them as authority. Of course, ultimately, you have the right to question and challenge with reasons, with grounds. There's also memory many a times because we remember so many things. For example, right now when I'm speaking, I don't have any notes in my hand, nor am I sharing a screen with you, nor am I having any notepad. I remember all these things and I'm sharing it with you. So memory also. Some people would say intuition. Now that's a bit problematic because intuitions are subjective. They change from person to person and we want knowledge to be objective. So I would say basically two most important sources of knowledge to which you can reduce all others are sense perception and reason. And your knowledge claims must be based on these. So there are people who are called rationalists who would say all knowledge begins with reason, and there are empiricists who would say no, all knowledge begins with sense experience. But let that be. Let's move on to the third branch of philosophy called ethics, where we are concerned with values. And what kind of values? Not simply utility values. No, I'm sure that many of your batchmates would have said, why philosophy? Is it useful in any way? Are we going to get grades? Are we going to get marks, a certificate? Is it going to help us in our understanding of economics? No, I don't want to join. I don't blame them. This is how we have been brought up in this modern times, unfortunately, that a lot of times we just think of utility. That's the ultimate value that we can think of. What is there in me for that? Is it going to be useful? Yeah. But values that ethics is concerned with are called moral values or ethical values, which are concerned with human beings and their actions and their intentions, right? Because I am a social being. Human beings, Aristotle defined man as a rational animal and as a social animal. We are both rational and social. We have to live in a society, and society, living in a society requires that we are all bound by certain norms, rules, regulations. Otherwise, it will be a very chaotic, anarchic situation, isn't it? It would be a very crisis-like situation, war of all against all, as Hobbes would say. We don't want to have it. We want to have peaceful coexistence. So we have to come to agreement, and we have to come up with certain laws. So there are many such things which regulate our behavior and tell us what is acceptable and what is not. Like law, religion, opinion of the majority. Sometimes you also speak of conscience, which guides you what to do, what not to do. Ethics goes beyond all of this and raises questions about each of these. Because each of these change are fallible, there are shortfalls. And so what ethics deals with, the questions that ethics deals with is, when is an action morally good? Or when is an action morally right? What are the criteria? Ethics does not tell you. It asks. And then, of course, there are theories again. Yeah. So if you think of good, again, there are two very important questions about good. Whose good are we talking about? Good about myself or good about the society? Or good about all those who are being affected by my action? Or I also have to think, what is good? For those who have not joined the class or those who are getting bored, this is not good. But for some of you, I hope this is good. For me, it's definitely good. Let me assure you of that. So what is good? How do we understand good? So there are two questions related with good also. Whose good should be considered and how do we define good? For some people who are called hedonists, utilitarians, they think that pleasure is good. The only good that everybody pursues and ought to pursue is pleasure. So ethics basically deals with this question, what should I do? What ought I to do? What are my duties? There are some ethicists or moral philosophers who would say, leave aside the idea of what is pleasant and what is unpleasant, what makes you happy, what makes you unhappy. Just perform your duty for duty's sake and that's it. You're ethical only when you perform your duty for duty's sake, not otherwise. And then the million-dollar question for these people is, how do I know what is my duty? Who decides what is my duty, on what basis? So on the one hand, you have Gita telling you, Nishkama karmayo, karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't think of the consequences. Don't think of the effects. Do your duty. On the other hand, on the Western side, you have Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, saying, do your duty, that which can be universalized, that which you can prescribe for everyone in your situation to perform is your duty. Do your duty. That's what makes it ethical. And of course, there's a third approach. There's an approach called consequentialist. The utilitarians are consequentialists because they think that goodness of action is dependent on the consequences of action. Deontologists, or those who are duty, whose ethics is duty-centered, they deny consequentialism. Okay, and then there's a third approach which is called virtue ethics, which was advocated by Aristotle in the ancient times, that those actions which a virtuous person performs are virtuous or good actions, right? I know that this has been a very, very cursory introduction to ethics, but I think if there are any more questions or if we have another occasion to meet, then I can go into details of that. Right now, I think I'll stop here and let you speak now. Yeah, it would be good for me to hear other voices. Yes.
Ma'am, I have a question. So according to you, what is real, number one? And number two, would you consider everything material to be real or no?
Rahul, look at your question. Okay, let's begin with, yeah, because, philosophy, for me, the central value of philosophy is in raising questions. Okay, giving answers is not our job. If I may say so. Like I said, we provide directions for finding answers, but we hardly provide answers because we never even claim that this is the answer. But anyway, jokes apart. See, you have to be very careful in asking your questions because the concepts that you use in raising questions, if they themselves are ambiguous and confused, it's very difficult to find the answer. That is why it's said that a well-raised question is already half answered. You have already moved in the direction of answer. Okay. Now, see, if you ask me what according to me is real, first and foremost, I must caution you that you should not use any personal authority in deciding what is real, what is unreal. But let me tell you honestly, I am of the opinion that, okay, let me put it this way. I am these days tending towards scientific materialism. In characterizing reality. But at the same time, I do not completely reject the possibility of there being something beyond matter, which in technical philosophical terms is called transcendental. To transcend is to go beyond. So logically speaking, I cannot claim 100% that if I don't experience something through my perception, because whatever is material, I can experience in principle, at least through my sense perception. So whatever I don't experience through my sense perception does not exist. I cannot make that claim because all my claims are based on my experience. So whether there is anything beyond my experience, the limits of my experience, I cannot say. I'm skeptic in that respect. I have a little doubt about that. It may be there, it may not be there. I can't say for sure. Now, the next question was, do you think that everything that is material is real? Now you tell me, how do you define material?
Anything which you can perceive, according to me,
Huh?
you can perceive from your 5 sense organs.
Okay. And then what do you think of appearances, which I spoke about? Illusions?
Illusions, in a way, you can't use all 5. Okay, now I'm very
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Elaborate a bit on that.
So you can see illusions, but you can't touch them.
Correct.
Or even though you can ideally touch everything else. So I do feel very constricted in that sense. I do not know if I would consider that to be real or no.
Correct. But don't you think the material would also be tangible? Something that can be touched also?
Yeah, I do think that anything material should be tangible too.
Yeah. So if that is the case, like you said, there are certain appearances where I think that there are material things, but they're not there. Now, how do I know that they're not real? On the basis of further experience. So a traveler in a desert, when he reaches a particular spot, then he realizes that, oh, it was only a mirage. There was no water after all. Because then your senses don't confirm. Or like you say, if there's a glass wall on which there are absolutely no stains and a huge glass wall, and it's so clear, it's so transparent that you go and dash against it because you don't realize that there's a glass. Yeah. And after you touch, dashing is what? The tactile sensation. Then you will say, oh my God, there's a glass wall here. Isn't it? So these things happen. So it's only experience on the basis of which we can have further confirmation of our earlier judgments. That's why I said there's no finality. But generally we can say, like you just suggested, tactile sensation seems to be safest. All five sense organs, yes. Tactual seems to be, it has a higher level of authenticity. Yes.
Okay, Anushe has a
Yes.
question.
Yes, about this tactical thing.
Huh.
Can't we turn the fact that we've discovered that matter can be turned into energy, right? E is equal to mc square. But then if it happens backwards as well, then if you rely on your tactical senses, you can't really feel energy. Neither can you see it or smell it. But it is, I mean, if it has the capability to turn into matter, which we are basing our, perceptions on, then that entire system kind of breaks down, I think.
Yeah, see, Anushe, there's a very important distinction that is made in methodology of science between theoretical terms and observational terms. Certain terms that science uses and what they denote can actually be observed, but there are certain terms that refer to things which cannot be observed. Think of a simpler example, because E is equal to mc square is quite abstract. I perfectly get what you're trying to say. It's a very valid point. Think of gravity, law of gravity. Accepted scientific truth, very objective, universally accepted, etc., etc. And probably you cannot explain anything without assuming the law of gravity today in physics. Yes, but do we perceive law of gravity through any of the sense organs?
No, it's a force.
Obviously not. But what we perceive are effects of the law of gravity, don't we? When anything that we throw up comes down, any freely falling body comes down, or the high tide and low tide and the movements of the planets, this is something that we see, the events that we see, and as the ancient metaphysicians, we try to go beyond them to know why are they behaving the way they are behaving. So there must be a law that governs their behavior. This law-governed nature of the universe is also in a way an assumption. Do you realize, Anushi? Science also assumes that nature is law-governed because it doesn't find examples where it is, behaving randomly or arbitrarily. But do you ever see the laws? Like you said, do you ever see the energy? Probably not. I'm not very sure of that, because I think if there's energy, I must be feeling it maybe remotely at least. And when it turns into matter, now how do I say that? How am I justified in even saying that if I don't know whether energy exists, that it transforms itself into matter? On what basis can I say that? But if I can see the effects of that energy, like, today the words that are used, the terms that are used are forces, like the electromagnetic force, the gravitational force, the four forces that we talk about. These forces are not seen, not perceived, but their effects are felt or perceived. And it is on that basis that we assume their existence, or we postulate their existence, right? So we are using both sense perception and reason in order to go beyond what meets the eye, so to say, and give an explanation of that. And that's precisely the job of science: explanation and then prediction, of course.
If anyone else has any questions, you can either raise your hand or drop a comment. Ma'am, Gandhar has a question.
Yes, sure. Go ahead, Gandhar.
Ma'am, when we spoke about knowledge, so I had taken philosophy in 11th and 12th, so I had studied a little bit. So who do you tend to agree with on your own beliefs, the rationalists or the empiricists?
Okay. Gandhar, have you also studied Kant and Kant's critical philosophy?
Just a little bit, not a lot.
Oh, okay. So I would talk a bit about that. I just said earlier that rationalists are those people or those philosophers who think that all knowledge has to begin with reason and experience comes later. And empiricists are those who would say that all knowledge begins with experience, reason comes later and organizes the empirical data. Rationalists believe that there are certain ideas with which are born. They're called innate ideas. So, for example, how do I know that I exist? Not by looking at my body. Yeah. I don't have to pinch myself in order to know that, oh, it hurts. I know that my existence, they would say, because that's an inborn idea that I have. And similarly, I have an idea of matter or material world, and I also have the idea of God. Now, that is very disputable, to say the least. Yeah, but basically, rationalists believe that there are certain a priori, these are called a priori ideas because they come prior to, before experience. And these rational principles, ideas, actually initiate the process of knowledge acquisition. The empiricist would, on the other hand, say, first of all, sense organs have to give you inputs about the world, and then reason would start processing them. So sense data is like raw material. Reason processes it, and the product is knowledge. So there is the entire assembly line, as it were, working there. Now, Kant, Immanuel Kant, who comes after both the rationalist and empiricist philosophers, philosophical traditions, tried to put it in a very cliched manner, tried to synthesize these two approaches by saying that, of course, I need the sensory inputs in order to talk about world, without which, how can I say what is there in the world? But I see the world from my own human perspective. I'm born with certain rational, logical framework. I'm born with it, which it is inherent. Like today, you would say that the neurologist would tell you in what manner does the brain process the information provided to it. Now, this is something we are born with, right? We inherit it. So Kant spoke about those a priori principles on the basis of which we organize the data that is given to us. Okay, so to come back to your question, Gandhar, I do not accept either rationalism or empiricism. I am a Kantian in that respect, and that also was reflected in my earlier answer to Anush's question, because Kant also feels that what transcends the limit of my sense perception, I cannot know whether it's there or not. So he has that skeptic tendency in him, but basically all the knowledge, scientific knowledge or any other kind of knowledge that we have is an outcome of working together of my sense experience, without which there is no content to my knowledge, and reason, without which there is no form to my knowledge. The sense content has to be organized, and that is the function of reason, which it does even prior to experience as such. That's a very technical and complicated theory, very difficult to explain in 2-3 minutes.
Gandhar, are you done with your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Ma'am, Jeet has a question now.
Yes.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I actually don't know are these questions about to ask the philosopher, but I want to know about 3 things very interrelated, like destiny, astrology, and what decides our personality, like who we are, how it gets decided, like by our nature or our family, or like we say, like someone say that it's the inherent trait of his family, or it's like something beyond we cannot imagine.
Yeah. See, destiny, if you speak of destiny, then you are talking about a force which decides whatever happens, and it happens in a particular way. So there is a sort of determinism. Do you understand the term determinism? Where everything is predetermined. Like you were destined to be in this class and raise this question for me. That sort of destiny. But then if you accept that, what happens to your free will? Do you really feel that you were forced? Somebody compelled you to be here and to raise this question? No, the concept of destiny is very, very problematic for me, right? Because first and foremost, because it straight away flies in the face of my experience that I have some freedom of will, that I can decide what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And I also at the larger level, I see that because, when you talk of destiny, it's like a blind force working from somewhere. It doesn't have any purpose. It doesn't have any logic. You just say, oh, that was my destiny, that I met with an accident. No, you call it an accident because, you don't know the cause-effect relationships that worked at that time. Yeah, they happened in a manner which you did not expect. So that becomes accidental. And because you can't explain it, you call it its destiny. Yeah. So I personally don't accept that notion because it is very problematic. You can't really prove that there is anything called destiny like that. Like I said, it's just a name given to a things, to a collection of events that happen for which we don't have explanation. When we can't say anything about that, we say, oh, it was our destiny. So was Pandey our
Science
destiny?
requires explanation. Philosophy also requires explanation and evidence.
Yeah, but then what kind of explanation? Think of that, Jeet, because explanation is a causal explanation. So given a cause, the effect will happen. Now, if you want an explanation in what we call in terms of purpose, why did these things happen? Now, this has an assumption that everything happens for a purpose. That assumption itself is questionable. Today's science has a very mechanical view of the world. No? The entire universe works like a machine, and a machine doesn't have a purpose.
Yes.
Machine doesn't have a purpose. There is only cause-effect relationship operating there. If you come from that approach, then why? Why did I meet with an accident? It has answers only in terms of because you stopped and somebody came, and this really happened with me, so I'm explaining it in that manner. Somebody came and probably could not control his vehicle, dashed against you, and you met with an accident. Beyond that, if I go, but why me? No, then there is no answer to that question because I happened to be there at that time. I would simply say that. I would not go to the same because, in last birth, I had probably dashed against somebody in a similar manner, or simply that it was my destiny to do so. No, that's not, in fact, Jeet, I would say referring to destiny is no explanation. It's escapism. It's not giving an explanation at all, because wherever you cannot give explanation, you can say destiny. So finished, period. Yeah. Okay, what was your next thing?
The second thing was, it's very much related to this only, the astrology.
Astrology. Well, okay, very good. Now, there is, I would refer something to you, which I would like you to read if possible, because all of you are techno-savvy and Google is always there to help you out. There was a philosopher in 20th century, Sir Karl Popper, British philosopher.
Karl Popper.
Karl Popper. K-A-R-L, Karl, P-O-P-P-E-R. Karl Popper has given a criterion to demarcate between what is scientific and what is non-scientific. So we have this long debate whether astrology is a science or not, whether astrology should be taught in the universities as an academic discipline, etc., etc. Now, the way in which astrology is usually practiced in our society, there seems to be some probabilistic logic working for it, isn't it? Whether it's palmistry, whether it's horoscope reading, whatever. So you have some hypotheses, conjectures that if these configurations are there, then these things will happen. But just imagine that when things do not happen the way in which the astrologer predicts, you go back to him and ask, why did it not happen? And then he will come up with a very complicated explanation, say that no, probably your horoscope is not correct, all sort of alibis would be made. Because, to put it in Popperian terms, true science is falsifiable. For example, contrast astrology and astronomy. Astronomy is a science, established science. Yeah, there also we are talking of planets and we have no control, remember, over planets. But in astronomy, the predictions are based on mathematical calculations, as in astrology to an extent, and also on some empirical data. And in astronomy, you will yourself find that it is been inbuilt in the theory, which tells you that if the theory is false, what will happen? Or when would the theory really be falsified? I don't know whether you all have heard about Eddington's experiment, which really proved Einstein's theory. Take this down. This is very interesting. Eddington's experiment actually proved Einstein's theory that the path of the light coming from a distant star would be deviated. When the time at which Einstein had predicted the path of the light, there was no empirical proof for that. Okay. But inbuilt in his theory was, if it is not deviated, then my theory is falsified. He is open to that as a scientist. But actually, it so happened that Eddington's experiment proved what Einstein had predicted earlier. All right. So science always is open to criticism and refutation. It tells you how scientific theories can be refuted. Whereas astrology, and Popper will go to the extent of saying even theories of Freud and Jung, theory of Marx, they are all non-sciences or pseudosciences because they are not falsifiable. And I think I would go with that. Astrology, according to me, is not science because it is not falsifiable. So it's interesting, I find it interesting.
Many times it stands true also.
Yes, but then can it tell you why is it true at when it is true and why is it false at when it is false?
It has its own theory, but we can never understand.
No. See, is there a unanimous theory also existing that
No,
our
like-
astrologers accept?
No, like it's a subject you just told, na, astronomy.
It's just a subject like astronomy? Do you think so?
Yeah, I have heard of people like gold medalists in astrology and these kind of.
Don't
I
take
don't
them
know
seriously.
exactly.
Don't take them seriously. Astronomy has a definite body of accepted knowledge, which you won't find in astrology. This universality and objectivity and falsifiability, which are characteristics of science, the way in which we accept physics as a science, biology as a science, this you will not find happening with astrology or many of the social science theories also. Okay, this is not endorsing Popper completely, but this is merely to make you curious so that you read further and probably come back to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and the last one, Jeet?
The last one was what decides how a person we are, like what decides our personality.
Okay. See, there is when I was a student, undergrad student, we always used to be told about this heredity and environment thing. So some things is your heredity. This is what your family is, and this is what your cultural and familial environment is. You are brought up in this way. So nature, nurture kind of a thing. Few things come from nature, few other things are added by way of nurture. Now, this is true. I'm not completely denying it, but this is rather simplistic. What we have come to know today through evolutionary sciences. Now, this is very important in today's world. We know that there is an entire history of how human beings have evolved to the level of Homo sapiens, sapiens, and all of that. Yeah, just go through it. Many things, I would say most of the things which make us what we are actually biologically inherited. Biologically. And I'm not, this does not only refer to familial inheritance. This refers to inheritance as human species. The kind of environment and situation the human species found themselves in, and because of which what kind of changes happened, how the neocortex was formed, for example. Right? How did the frontal lobe come into existence and it started working in a particular way, right? All this, how did we turn into from hunting gathering stage to agricultural society, and then to industrial society, then post-industrial, etc. All that has affected us at the biological level in a very, very deep manner. And there is a very and then another very important thing that the evolutionary philosophers speak about or theorists speak about is a child and a child's nature, as you would say, mentality, whatever it is basically formed in the early years of childhood, about 5 to 8 years. That's called the window period. So what inputs you are being given at that tender age basically shapes you. So apart from the biological inheritance as human species, and of course you genetically inherit a lot of things like your proneness to diseases, your capacities from the family history, and then this crucial period of childhood. Whatever you have been told, what the atmosphere in which you grow up, that shapes you. And after that, there's very little that is left in your hand. Very little flexibility where you can, literally तोड़ मोड़ के मरोड़ के कुछ अलग बना सको. बहुत कम होता है. बहुत कम होता है. So that's what makes us.
We very hardly change after a certain age. Like it's difficult to change.
Yes, it's very. I won't say it's impossible, but yes, it's extremely difficult. You need a lot of conscious effort and proper surroundings of also.
Okay, so it's like, scientifically backed that people say that old age people cannot change, you have to change.
Yes,
So like,
because, see, a person like me who is 60 plus, it's very difficult for me because now that has been ingrained in my mind, and literally at the biological level, it goes at the core level of my brain, those memories, and they become inscribed, as it were. People who have dementia, people who have Alzheimer, they can remember what has happened to them in childhood, but they don't remember what was said 2 minutes ago, because that just gets erased immediately. So as you grow old, your flexibility, physical as well as psychological, intellectual, is reduced. If you want to keep that intact, you have to exercise. Intellectual exercise is also necessary.
okay, thank you so much, ma'am.
Welcome.
Ma'am, I have one more question for you.
Sure, Rahul.
What are your viewpoints on causation?
As in?
Causation.
What exactly is your question? I don't understand.
In the sense, what are your viewpoints on causation? What do you think about causation?
What is causation for you, Rahul?
Causation is that because something happens, it leads to something else. And you are saying that, say that the process A leads to process B, that A is the cause of B. So that is causation. That is because A happened, B is happening now.
Correct.
And so what do you think about this? Because I'm like,
what is there for me to think? I have to accept it.
I mean, so do you just accept it without question in that case, or do you look at it?
Precisely that. What I am interested in this kind of description of causation, I accept. Now, what is it that makes you question this? Then I can tell you whether I accept it or not. Why do you find that this is problematic?
I have to think a little bit more on this.
Yeah. See, there are theories of causation, as I told you in Metaphysics. Aristotle speaks of 4 basic causes because of which everything comes about. There is something from which something is made, so there has to be a material cause. Then that material cause has to take a certain shape, which he calls a formal cause. Then there is something which shapes it. Okay, somebody who shapes it, so that he would call an efficient cause. So if you have a earthen pot, there is soil first, then the pot maker shapes it, etc. And then it is for the sake of something, storing water, for example. So why? For that purpose. So this was what the old science accepted. This is called the teleological view of universe, where Jeet's question made sense. Why did this happen? Yeah, purpose. Was there any purpose behind it? But like I said, today's science does not accept it. It's a mechanical view of the world, where some rationalists generally said that cause-effect relationship is necessary. Given the cause, the effect must occur. And there is no escaping this. So there are 2 principles that philosophy talks about: uniformity of causation and universality of causation. Fine. Universality says nothing happens without a cause. So there are no miracles. Strictly speaking, no accidents, no coincidences. There is always a cause-effect relationship which is operative. You may know the causes, you may not. That's a different story. But nothing happens without a cause. And the second one is uniformity of causation, which says uniform causes give rise to uniform effects, or similar causes give rise to similar effects. Fine. Now, there was another skeptic and a very rebellious kind of philosopher who was an empiricist, David Hume, who said that no cause-effect relationship is not at all necessary. You can very well imagine that you put your hand in fire and it doesn't get burned. Why not? Can't you imagine that? And yes, I don't, but I never experienced. But yes, I can imagine, all sorts of things happen in Harry Potter's school of magic, don't they? Although they never happen in the real world. So what he was trying to show was that you cannot rationally prove that given A, B will occur. Because there is always a possibility that A will be there and B may not occur. How do you know? He raised a very interesting question, Rahul, which you would find if you are looking, you would want to look into this, please go through this. He asked, how do you know that the future will resemble the past? The sun has been rising for last how many years we don't even know. But how do you know that it will rise tomorrow? What is the guarantee? He raised questions about this inductive, economics uses a lot of inductive logic, inductive inferences. And he raised a very basic question about that. How do you know that all these instances that you have gathered as your premises lead to your conclusion, which is a generalization, that every human being is a rational agent? Isn't it a huge assumption in economics? Yeah, how do you know? Some people are quite irrational, it seems. You get my point. So that is why I would want you to frame your question in some detailed way. Now, what exactly is you think problematic in principle of causation? As I've told you right now, universality and uniformity, I think I accept it. By the way, just one suggestion before we say bye-bye, maybe it's time to say. I don't know, I don't mind. I am a teacher who can go on and on, but students usually get bored. Those of you who are interested in knowing philosophy, the 11th and 12th standard textbooks for philosophy, I have been one of the authors of these textbooks. And let me assure you that these are really very interesting read. They make a very interesting read because they're trying to introduce philosophy to a complete novice. Yeah, and in a very sort of informal, friendly manner, interactive manner. And these are available on Bal Bharati website for free download. So you don't even have to go to the market and buy them. You can just download them. Those of you who feel interested in philosophy, now that you have heard so much and you are going to have few more lectures on this, probably some of you would be curious to know. So just download those books and see if you like them. And if you like them, please tell me. I'll feel happy. Yes, Rahul.
No, that was what I was trying to say, was that regarding the causation question, that's what I was thinking. Like, how do you know that the sun will rise tomorrow as well?
Yes.
That's actually where my question was.
Okay. So, Rahul, the point is that today's science also says this, although philosophers earlier have had very stringent ideas about this, that knowledge has to be certain. What does that mean? That you should not be having any doubts about it. It has to be indubitable. If there is any doubt, then it's not certain. Knowledge has to be certain. But with the development of science, we have realized that there is no certainty even in scientific knowledge. What science accepts today, it rejects after a few years. Like I said, there's a possibility, not that it always rejects, but there's a possibility which scientists accept. And that is what makes the scientific spirit of mind truly. That is what makes the scientist non-dogmatic and open-minded. So that kind of certainty that the sun will rise tomorrow, no, sorry, I don't have it. All that I can say is, in all probability, 99.9% probability the sun will rise tomorrow. I'll not give you 100% certainty for that. Does that help?
Yeah, I think I'll agree to that.
Yeah.
So if there are no more questions, then I think we can wrap things up for today. So does anyone have any more questions? Anusha?
Yes.
So this isn't a question per se, but it's just an observation that I had, which I wanted to share. When you were talking about evolution, and I thought it really does manifest itself in the way that I think we even think about how knowledge should be sort of gathered, or for that matter, how information should be converted into knowledge. Because when you were talking about the whole WhatsApp university thing, so I feel like my parents, and for that matter, the generation of our parents, is much more gullible in that sense than we are, because they always take the written word to be, true. Because at that point of time, when they were probably in their most sort of malleable years, the written word was quite literally something that wasn't, it couldn't be published if it wasn't true, right?
No, that was never the case, Anusha, because there was always people trying to push their own false views and fake facts. But yeah, you're absolutely right. People which belong to my generation or even younger than me are quite gullible, because my elders also used to say, what is the proof that what you say is true? If I ask my say for mother-in-law, for example, she would say, but it has come in the newspapers.
Yeah.
The chapun alai, that it is printed gives it some kind of authenticity. So even to my friends and my my relatives, I keep telling, please don't believe what you read on WhatsApp or Facebook or Insta, whatever. Please don't believe it 100%. Yeah, you are right. Actually, they need to be warned more than your generation, because I think you know both the good and the bad sides of the social media, right?
I think because we've grown up with it, we've
Yes.
grown up with realizing that everything
True.
that is written not necessarily, needs to be, the true and sort of just like unquestionable truth. And
True.
that's why I think yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And sometimes you see these babies who can go to even, the most remotest of settings inside smartphones and sort of
Yeah.
unlock the phone and things like that. And it's really sort of evolution, which is coming into picture.
Absolutely.
Because
I
you think-
totally agree.
Yeah,
Thank you for that observation, because I was always like, oh my God, this generation is so much into social media. I must tell them that there's a difference between information and knowledge and all that, or check the authenticity of the sources. But yeah, you actually have corrected me. So thank you so much for that, Anshi.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is what brought me to expressing myself, because I mean, even babies, for example. So we used to think that maybe knowledge isn't being formed at such a tender age, at a 1 year or a 2-year-old child being able to do that. But it's obvious that through observation and through learning, they can even draw conclusions when we think that the neurons aren't even sort of functioning properly and we aren't making memories and all those kinds of things.
Yes, definitely.
There you
It
have
starts at a very young age. I would say, in fact, at a prenatal stage, it all begins. So the story of who was that? Oh my God, Abhimanyu. You have to take it in its true spirit. That process of gaining knowledge begins in the prenatal stage, when you are in the womb of your mother. From that time, it begins. So the kids are very knowledgeable. Yeah.
Okay, then on that note, I think let's wrap things up for today. And I thank you so much, Deepti ma'am, for taking the time out to speak to us. And if you are comfortable with sharing your contact details, I can do so if anyone wants to get in touch with you.
Sure, no problem, Rahul. You can share. I would be very glad if I can get in touch with young people like you and discuss philosophy with them, because that's my first love.
Okay, ma'am. So then I think on that note, we'll call it a day today.
Yes.
Once again, thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you, Rahul, and thank you everybody for giving me your patient hearing. Thank you so much. And sorry for postponing the lecture, because I was unwell for last 2 or 3 weeks, and that's why I had to postpone. I'm really sorry for that. And thank you, you have been very patient with me. Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.